Great to have you here with us this morning. If you are a first-time guest, thank you for being at Compass today. Thank you for starting your week with us. You saw we've got some great things coming up. So just let me say first, if anxiety, stress, fear of the future, feeling overwhelmed, even problems in the past, if those things don't impact you at all, then you don't have to worry about showing up for the next few weeks. But for most of us, I'm really looking forward to this series. It's gonna be incredibly helpful. Then we're into Easter, right? It's only a few weeks away. And then after that, we're gonna bring back our At the Movie series. We've got some great movies planned for that. So a great finish to the spring and kickoff to the summer. So be sure to get here, be sure to bring friends. We're looking forward to all that we've got going on there. But today, we're going to finish up our Parental Guidance Required series. I hope that it has been helpful to some of you a little bit. Hopefully, maybe even encouraged you to work on your relationships with your kids, maybe even with others, right? There's great principles beyond just children here that I think could be helpful as well. And can't we just acknowledge that relationships are hard, right? Relationships are difficult. And if you're going, I don't think so, you're probably not in a relationship right now. So relationships are challenging, and therefore parenting is really challenging because it's so much about relationships, right? And it can be very confusing at times. And as parents, sometimes, right, we feel like we do not have the answers. Sometimes I feel like I never have the answers. And here's what I love. I love young couples that are having their very first child, and they move from that blissfully, beautifully naive season of, I read a fantastic book, right? I've got it all figured out. We'll just do A, B, and C, and then our kid will just turn out great, right? Piece of cake. To, oh my word, she's a midget demon, right? Or he's driving me crazy. Please just tell me what to do. So we've been studying, kind of walking through this together, specifically whenever it comes to having children in the home. And we've recognized a few things here. Number one, you can't always make your kids' choices for them. Two, you don't have control over all of their experiences, right? We just can't always control that. But three, you do have influence for sure, and even some control over some of their relationships. So we talked about relationship with God, right? We got the God dial here in the middle. We talked about relationships first week with us as parents, and now we're gonna talk about relationships with others, those that are outside of the home. And we've kind of said in this series that our goal is not so much that the kids would be experience rich. We want them to have great experiences, go on great trips, do fun things, all that, we're for that. But more importantly, we want them to grow up and be relationship rich, because that's where we think they find strength, and it's critical to the health as they grow older. Think about this, the quality, and this is for parents, the quality of your relationship with your kids will determine the weight of your influence in their lives. So your ability to influence their choices, their experiences, and even relationships, which is why, right, it's so important that we invest relationally. Because think about this, here's reality. You may have a great relationship with your children, right? You may have that. They may have a great relationship with God, that's for sure. But again, there's one more dial in our kids' lives that has the power to change, listen, everything. And that is, listen, friends, right? The power of friends, right? Every child, even adults, man, we go through these seasons of others. I would say it's a lifetime of different seasons with others. And so it's helping them make wise decisions in this season. And in those seasons, it is so critical because you should never underestimate the power of friends in the lives of our children, right? They have lots and lots of influence, and in different seasons, they may have more power than any other relationship. So I wanna dive into that and talk about it in a minute, but first I want you to watch this video just real quick. All right, come on, so every child, every student, every adult, right? They need a number 50 in their lives, right? I wanna be as happy as that little kid after I have a 50 help me become better. So if you hear nothing else I say today and you check out after this first 5 minutes, no, your kids need a 50 in their lives, you need a number 50, and you should strive to try to be that for somebody. So think about this. I've heard it said, I've heard the quote from multiple places, so I'm not sure who it originated with, but the quote, show me your friends and I will show you your future, right? That is great wisdom for all of us to be aware of. As you think about who you are and where you are and what it is you want to become or the kind of leader that you would like to be. I heard this version of it in a leadership podcast. Show me who you're spending time with, who you're listening to, who you're hanging out with, and I will show you who you are becoming, right? So relationships in our lives matter more than you can even begin to imagine. Maybe you've heard it put this way, and I think this is generally true. As a general rule, I think this is true, that you will become the average of your 5 closest friends, right? So kind of in the middle, maybe with income, kind of the way you think, kind of the way you do entertainment, you sort of become the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to change who you are, then you should change who you are with, right? If you want to be or grow in your leadership or grow in some other area, then you should spend time hanging around someone who is stronger in their leadership or in that other area you want to grow in, and you will rise up whenever you are around them, right? That's just what tends to happen. So this is such an incredibly important concept for us to grasp, which brings us back to our conversation for today and where we're headed. What kind of company, right? What kind of company do your kids keep? Do you know? Have you thought about that? Think about this. Oftentimes, the greatest successes and the biggest regrets of our lives are attributed to friends, right? Can I get an amen, right? Anyone. Some of you can testify to that for sure. This is true for all of us. And it can go either way, right? It can go really good. It can go really bad. So I want to look at a verse, just a quick verse in Proverbs chapter 13, and then talk about why this issue is such an important issue. Here's what we read. Proverbs 13, verse 20. Simple verse. It says, walk with the wise and become wise, right? For a companion of fools suffers harm. Which that verse right there, written by Solomon, who many consider to be the wisest man to live next to Jesus. And listen, he found himself in both of these camps during his lifetime. So he understands the importance of the company that we keep. So let's go back, break this down. We're going to break it into 2 parts, looking at the encouraging part first, which is simply walk with the wise, and then what? You just become wise. Is that true? I would say like as a general rule, yes, I think so, right? That tends to kind of be true. Walk with the wise, become wise. Some of the greatest decisions of your life, right? Some of the greatest discoveries or choices or seasons of growth and joy in your life were because the right people were in your life at the right time. So this is a really, really great principle for all of us. Walk with the wise, become wise. I want to do this. I want to surround myself with people that make me better, right? I want that for me. I want that for you. I want that for our kids. So I don't just want to surround myself with the lowest person I can find on the evolutionary chain, right? So that I can do foolish, selfish, dumb things and then just have them affirm it and feel good about myself. And when it comes to the parenting context, this is really critical as our kids grow older. There's an old Yiddish proverb that says this: little children, little joys, that's for sure. Bigger children, bigger sorrows. And that can be true, right? Like it totally can be. There's just more on the line, and there's just more at stake as our kids grow older and as they begin to change. And I thought about this, so like I feel like I'm fairly cool as dad and parent. Like I've got a 14-year-old that will still like hold my hand whenever we go on vacation, walking on the beach, walking through the theme park. She'll come and hold my hand, which is really awesome, and that's fantastic. But I'm under no illusion that the cool factor is very, very quickly fading and disappearing, all right? Because like whenever your kids are small, right, whenever they're really little, so little girls think dad hung the moon and he's like the most amazing prince ever. And little boys, right, they think that dad can do anything, right? And he's just like the greatest warrior that has ever lived. But then they start getting older, right, growing up. Like now my girls are fairly aware that I can't even hang a picture on the wall, right, let alone the moon. Not even close. Like I don't know a lot of things. I told you a while back, maybe you were here and remember this, how my wife had flown in to the airport And as she was waiting to leave, some guy walked up and started talking to her in a way that made her feel slightly awkward, slightly uncomfortable, and she was telling us the story about that. And then my son, Zeke, he's in grade school, he said, it's a good thing that Dad wasn't there. And then she went on to explain that he's kind of the size of our youth pastor you just saw, who's fairly big and muscular. And then Zeke goes, oh, right, he probably wouldn't have been much help after all. No, even if that's true, and it is, right? You don't acknowledge it like you're my son. You're supposed to believe I can still do whatever. So listen, like it or not, man, these transitions happen, and it may hurt a little, but you have to adjust, right? You have to adjust. Because listen, if you keep trying to parent from size and position. And there's a season, we didn't really have time to unpack this much in this series. There is a season when you for sure do parent from size and position, right? When your kids are small, we hit on this last week, that first 0 to 12 years of discovery and testing and concluding. During that season, you for sure parent out of size and out of position, do you not? You're bigger, you're smarter, you're cooler. They literally have to look up to you in that season. And so you should do that in a way that's healthy and helpful. But if you try to leverage that, right? Size and position long after it is effective, well, then you can create more scars and more wounds and more distrust. So you create an emotional disconnect and a relational disconnect if you try to do that. Or you can start trying to help put other positive role models in your child's life. So listen, I heard this from wise counsel several years back, and I think it's a really great shift in thinking that we have to make as parents, and it is this. Your goal, right? Your goal is not to shelter your children. And again, hear me, I understand, again, young, 0 to 12, when you bring them home from the hospital in the child seat, you don't like just stick them on the porch and say, good luck, Jimmy. Hope you make it right. There is a season for sure that we shelter. But ultimately, goal is not to shelter your kids so much as, hear me, prepare. Right? Prepare them to be leaders and to make wise decisions, because you will not be able to protect them for all of their lives, right? You're just not gonna be able to, so you need to prepare them. And if what you try to do is constantly just shelter from any experience and learning how to lead and make wise decisions, and instead of preparing them, then you put them in danger, right? Whenever you're no longer able to do that. And that day is coming, right? Eventually, you're not going to be able to. So we want to prepare. And listen, as well, there just comes a time when it feels like, parents, if you've been good, godly parents, where it just feels like you're not able to move the God dial as much as you would like, right? You start to lose some ability there. You're really trying. But maybe, listen, in that season, and especially if you have older kids, you kind of go more into prayer mode. So Jim Cymbala, he used to be a pastor at Brooklyn Tabernacle, and he wrote a book called Fresh Wind, Fresh Fire, really great little read. I would highly encourage it. And he talks about his oldest daughter going through a season where she was just straying far from God. She was out of college, she was young adult, she was just making really bad decisions that was creating a lot of pain and hurt. And he talked about how he tried so hard to control that for a season, and it just made things worse, and it was straining the relationship, and communication was completely breaking down. And he said he finally realized that there was nothing he could do, right? And he just had to entrust her to God. And he talked about just a season of being on his face in tears on the ground, just praying for his girl. And it was a pretty long, hard season. And of course, he'd established a healthy relationship with her and between her and God whenever she was really young. And she did come back around, but he talked about that being a hard season. I heard a friend recently talking about how in the story of Moses, right, when Moses is a baby and the Pharaoh, the guy in charge in Egypt, has this edict out that he's killing all the baby boys because he's worried about his leadership, he's being threatened. So Moses' life is in danger as a baby, and his mom tries to protect him, keep him safe, keep him quiet as long as she can. And eventually she can't do that anymore, it's going to come out. So she makes the basket, puts him in the Nile. And he said this really great line as parents. And some of this, I hope this is encouraging. You do your best, and then you trust God with the rest. And sometimes that's all you can do. And you can't beat yourself up sometimes when they make decisions that are hurtful, harmful. You do your best, you trust God with the rest. And maybe Maybe your kids haven't gone that far. You're not in a season where they're that far, but it still feels like the God dial's a little bit harder to turn, or maybe even the parenting dial is getting a little bit harder to turn. Because here's the reality. Maybe your kids really love you, but listen, you are the rule maker, right? Mom and dad, they can't tell you everything because then at some level there's just more rules, okay? So sometimes you need someone outside, right? Someone that's in the other category to mentor and speak into their lives. And there's oftentimes a lot of good people outside of the home who could be a good influence on them. Because again, at some level, we have to function as lawmaker and judge, right? So that does create some level of barriers. And there for sure are exceptions to the rule, right? Some kids, even as they get teens and older, actually tell mom and dad everything, which is really awesome. If you're a parent and you had that season, you're in that role, that's also very, very rare, okay? So practically then, let's talk about this. Some positive relationships outside of the home, right, that maybe you can help dial in, right? Maybe dial in a little bit into the lives of our children. So let me give you just a couple things to think about, whatever season they're in. Maybe you can recognize this and try to do it, especially as they're young, but you didn't think where else God would allow you to do this. So number one, just spiritual role models, right? Who might be a really good spiritual role model? So if you notice, right, like a godly man or a godly woman, maybe in the church, maybe in your neighborhood, maybe some other area in your life that would spend time with your child. Okay, well then for sure hook that relationship opportunity up. So whenever she was in middle school, she would spend time going to lunches regularly with our previous children's pastor, Chris Estam. Chris would just take her to lunch. They would go, she would mentor, she would encourage her. My middle daughter as well, she had another young woman that was part of the student ministry that would take her to breakfast or spend time with her regularly. Those things are great ways to start helping someone outside of the house, someone else, to help develop them spiritually. Right now, all three of my kids love hanging out with Nancy Fitzgerald, who is our director of operations, events, business, pretty much everything that goes on here. If you're plugged in some way, you have met Nancy. She's awesome. So Nancy's life reminds me of Mary Poppins' suitcase, right? Mary Poppins' bag. Do you guys remember the original Mary Poppins? And like she comes into the house and she goes to her room, she starts pulling stuff out of the bag that should not be in there. And then there's no way it should fit. You're like, how did you do that? And where did that come from? That's what Nancy's life reminds me of. Every time you talk to her, she pulls something else out of the bag that you wouldn't expect. You're like, you were a ski instructor? You lived in France? You're an astronaut, built a rocket and flew to the moon? How did that happen? That is crazy, right? And so she's just great. And our kids love her. Even my 11-year-old, Zeke, he will tell me on Thursday night, I've got to go up to church and help serve with Nancy, right? So has just become a really great spiritual type mentor in their lives. And listen, we don't force those things. We recognize those and then we lean into them when we do recognize them. Here's another area that I want you to consider as well. And how about this? Grandparents, right? Just think in this term. Grandparents can. And let me emphasize the word can here, because I know that that's not always the case, right? I fully get that, but they can be a great source of spiritual support, right? One, because they oftentimes have the extra time and even willingness to make the sacrifice that other people just won't, right? And if you have a good relationship with grandparents and you know they are spiritually strong, then that can be a great way to help work on your kids' spiritual growth outside and be one of those others. If that is not the case in your family dynamic, maybe your parents aren't close to God, maybe grandparents aren't a good example, or you're just not even close, right? Like just geographically, you're not even that close. Okay, listen, maybe you can adopt a grandparent, right? I would have you consider that. We did this whenever we lived across the country. So whenever our kids were small, just starting grade school and not even close to being in grade school yet, and we were nowhere close to family or nowhere close to grandparents. And there was this lady named Christy Welchel. So her kids had all grown up. I think her youngest was maybe a senior at that time. She had two older boys that were out of college, didn't have grandchildren yet, but she was awesome with our kids. So she really loved Jesus. She was a lot of fun, and she just would do things like, she would call Molly and I and say, hey, bring your kids over. I want to hang out with them. You guys got to go do something else, which was basically her way of saying, go on a date free on me, which was fantastic in that season. But she's like, hey, bring the kids over, get out of here. And then they would play. They would play games, do activities, go swim. She would take them to the school where she worked and to her classroom where they were like raising ducks and stuff. And our kids loved it, man. And they loved her and they didn't even want to come home, which was also awesome. But she was just... She was a fantastic spiritual role model. Listen to what we read in Proverbs 17:6. Grandchildren are the crowning glory of the aged. Parents are the pride of their children. To which I would say, listen, maybe someone in the room right now, you need to look around and pay attention to someone you could do that for. Right? Maybe God's got you in that season, want to give you that ministry opportunity, being a spiritual role model. It was such a huge blessing to us in that season. And maybe God would use you to do that as well. So Molly and I now, we've been married right at 21 years, and God has just put some incredibly great spiritual mentors and role models in the lives of our kids. Whenever we did young adult ministry out on the West Coast, whenever Zeke was just born, we've got a couple guys that were part of that ministry that are still like family to our kids, right? We call them Uncle Andy and Big Chris, right? So we've just been seriously blessed, right? Incredibly blessed, not because we're special at all, right? Not in any way, but because we have been intentional and we've been aware. I would say it's like this. It's like a game for me of red light, green light. So you pray for people and you pray for opportunities and you ask God to send them. And when you feel like God's moving in something, all right, green light, right? Let's go, let's move, let's step into that. And if it feels like it's not honoring God, not something God would be in or moving, all right, well, pump the brakes, right? Hit the pause button like Mayday, Mayday, abort that mission and stay away from that, which will bring us then to the next part of the text. Right? So the first part is walk with the wise and you will become wise. So we consider, is there someone in our child's life that we need to maybe try to dial in? A spiritual mentor, a role model, someone that would be helpful outside of, immediate family. And then here's the second part though. A companion of fools suffers harm. So what he's saying is whenever and in this context, whenever we let our kids hang out with foolish people, we put them in harm's way. That is so true, is it not? So we tell our kids, stay away from the really steep ledge or don't put your hand on the hot stove. But then if we let them hang out with people that put them in danger relationally or emotionally or spiritually, that can be just as devastating for sure, right? And we all get this. Everybody in the room can relate to this principle, right? Because I would say most likely some of your greatest regrets in your life, or some of the greatest regrets in the lives of people that you know involved somebody you met and a relationship you got involved in that then went south, that really turned very bad, became very unhealthy, and started a downward spiral that impacted you and impacted others. Right? Like some of you found yourself in a relationship that maybe they had anger issues, right? So when things got tense, the real them came out and it was not pretty. And it was very hurtful. Maybe they had, listen, this can be a big deal, spending issues, right? Like they have no control at all. You're always going to be in debt, right? That's like how they cope with stress, whatever. They just spend more money. That creates lots and lots of conflict. Maybe it's abusive tendencies that maybe you didn't see initially. Verbally, physically, mentally, they're abusive. Honesty issues where maybe they're really fun and you love them and they're so great to hang out, but I can't trust you because you're not honest. Or even addictions, right, that come to the surface, and as much as they want something healthy, the addiction just overbears. And I think this is easy to overlook in the lives of our kids because we tend to assume they'll just gravitate towards people that are like them or that we think that are like them and safe and positive. But come on, man, that is not always the case for sure, right? I mean, like just hit the pause button, take a moment, think back in your life to when you were a child and some of the friends that maybe you hung out with. So you can't always assume that. And we read this from Paul in 1 Corinthians 15, bad company corrupts good character. Is that not so true? And whenever our kids are young, right? And as they start to grow older, I think sometimes you have to say no to them and for them, right? Some of you parents, you need to learn this. Like there have been times where we've had to tell Zeke, our son, right? Like you cannot, we've had to straight up tell him, you can't be in a friendship relationship with this person, right? Because you don't always have the ability to make good choices when you're with him. So we're not judging him, right? I mean, maybe some of his actions, not his person. We love him, but that's not a relationship you can be in right now. So no, right? It's a no. And let me say this, right? And we really haven't had time to unpack this in this series. It's just 3 weeks, so we really didn't get to dive in. But let me say this really quickly. Some of you, you don't like to or you can't tell your kid no very well because you don't want to upset them, right? Or you don't want to make them mad at you because you want them to be your friend. But hear me, they need to learn no, right? It is good for them. And maybe you're in here, right? So maybe you came from a background, a family dynamic where you had a parent that was controlling and that was overbearing and domineering, and they said no a lot, and not in a gracious, not in a loving, not in a helpful way, but in a very harsh and a very hurtful way. And so you really have a hard time saying no to your kids. But do you know what happens, right? You know what happens whenever we can't tell our kids no? What happens is sometimes we'll say things like, I'll think about it, which means what? Which means I would say no, but I lack the courage, right? I'm a bit of a coward. Or parents sometimes will say, we'll see, which means what? Which is kind of no, but I'm going to let you hold out hope, right? Until I come along and crush it at a future date. So that's what it is, right? Here's the balloon, Jimmy, hang on till I pop it. And they're like, that was so mean. I know, right? Just say no, man. It's good for them. It's good for you, right? In the right context, it really is good. And maybe some of you came from a more legalistic background where all you heard was the cosmic killjoy God that always said no. And that's not the heart of God. We even did a series called The God of Yes. But maybe some of you come from a background where you just picture God as a sky fairy genie that just always nods yes to everything you ask. Sometimes God says no, right? And it's good to say no. Like the 10 Commandments, yeah? So Exodus chapter 20, God gives 10 commands. 9 of those commands, right? 9 of them, it is a thou shalt not. Which one is that? That's a no, right? That's what it is. God, can I commit adultery with the really cute girl at work? No. Okay, God, can I steal my neighbor's stuff? No. Well, if I lie, can I steal their stuff? Still a no, right? Well, can I find another God? No, you can't, right? God just says no. And if you love your kids, for sure, sometimes you will tell them no, right? Mothers were very quickly to nod yes on that. Dads, you were a little bit slower to respond. Hey, and make sure, listen, for sure, don't do that thing in the family where you create kind of the good cop, bad cop, right? You know what I mean? I'll pick on dads because I am one where your kid comes in the house and says, hey, can I go, skate in the highway? Can I go and jump off the roof, whatever? And you're like, I don't know, go ask your mom, right? Which means go make her the bad guy and become angry and frustrated with her, which that's not fair. So both parents need to be able to agree to say yes to some things and say no to some others. And again, in our context, and the big idea is that we're investing in our kids relationally. Help dial in, right? So some relationships that would be good for them and maybe dial out some that wouldn't be that healthy. Help them learn to say no to some things. And this is so critical, right? As your kids keep getting older, especially if you still have really young kids and as they get older. Because like this is the reason, I think, in many ways, that you will see a really great kid that's doing really great in school, really great in sports, really great in whatever, and then all of a sudden, just like take a turn for the worst and become uninterested or rebellious or indifferent. So often, it is the result of a bad relationship that comes from outside of the home. And like we can see it, right? You can see the wheels starting to fall off and the entire thing starting to unravel. Because again, bad company will corrupt good character. And back to our earlier quote, show me your friends and I'll show you your future. So this is a big deal, man. It's such I think it's in many ways a major make or break issue. And you can have some influence, right? You can have some control over this area. Wherever you're at, be really wise how you do this. Like listen, we love Jesus, right, in our family. We want our kids to be on mission with us and help us, listen, navigate people to God. Like our goal is that they would be salt and light to a hurting and broken world that needs Jesus. But understand, our goal is that they would be the light, right? Not flame out or get caught or flame up because we put a weight on them that they weren't ready to carry, right? Think about this. So yes, for sure, we want them in relationship with non-Christian kids, right? We want them to be light into the dark. But depending on their age, and you have to help assess this, with some parameters and as they are strong and as they are ready. Pastor Drew says this, he talked about he would teach his kids, influence other kids by day, right? Especially those that aren't a great influence. Influence them by day and then pray for them by night. And so he talked about they had daytime friends and they had nighttime friends, right? And some of you get this, right? Like Tommy is a really, really good daytime friend, right? You can hang out with Tommy in the day in certain safe environments and places. Yes, you can hang out and have some influence. When the sun goes down, nope. You're gonna need to get some distance. You guys can't hang out. I think that's awesome. I think that's really wise, right? To kind of think maybe in those categories as well. Here's something else you can do as your kids grow up. Create the home turf hangout policy, to which I would say allow your place to be the place where your kids and their friends hang out, right? So you got the media room, the game room, make a man cave, whatever. Get food, right? That's the ticket right there. Provide food and snacks. They will for sure come over, hang out, and love you and love your place. There have been nights, right? Because Sunday's like my first day of the week, my big day. So nights I'm trying to get to sleep on Saturday, get ready to prepare and come and preach for you guys. And it sounds like a herd of buffalo are charging on the upstairs above me as the kids are up there playing. But I will tell you this, I would rather trade a little sleep, right, for a little peace of mind. And one of the easiest, right, for sure, one of the easiest ways Satan will try to sneak his way into the lives of our children is through their friends. Right? He's a liar and he's a deceiver and he will masquerade as something good just to try and lead them astray. And he will totally try and do that through others, right? And your kids can't always see it. We can't always see it in some of our relationships, right? Like if you're honest, sometimes we can't. So listen, I heard about an experiment recently where they brought a test group of people in and had them count these guys that were wearing white t-shirts and black t-shirts and passing a basketball. And the test group was supposed to count the number of times the people wearing white t-shirts, how many times they passed the basketball back and forth. So they come in, they watch the video, they focused on the team, the guys that are wearing the white t-shirts, and how many times they passed the basketball back and forth to each other. So they did this and like almost everyone in the group paid attention, watched, and they got it right? 16 times they passed it back and forth. But then at the end of the experiment, they set them all down, right? They had everyone in the test group sit down and they asked them, did you notice, right, that in the middle of the video, a guy wearing a gorilla costume came walking into the frame, beat his chest, right? And then walked back out of the frame. And listen, over half of the people in the test group that did the experiment did not notice. And so they came up with this phrase that they called inattentional blindness, right? Inattentional blindness. So that we focus on certain things, right? I got focused in the white t-shirts, passing the ball, which can be good, right? You're dialed in to this thing that you're supposed to be paying attention to. But the downside is that they tuned everything else out. And so you got some dude in a gorilla costume pounding his chest and they couldn't even see it. And I think sometimes we're the same way, right? We'll talk about your kids because that's safe for you, but oh, he's cute, she's fun, that's cool, they do this thing, and they don't even see the gorilla on the inside pounding his chest that will eventually come out and cause major problems. And I think we can apply that personally as well. But But as parents, listen, I'm not saying judge or be righteous or go on a witch hunt. I'm just saying be wise, right? Like pay attention. Notice what they may not communicate. You're way too priceless to me. And I just love you so much that I'm gonna care enough to spend time seeing who it is that you're hanging out with. And then back to our question, who is it that maybe you need to help start dialing out of your child's life or helping them make wise decisions? Because again, these relationships are going to shape them and their future. So I want you to think back to our video, man, in context, right? Who's kind of a 50 in their life that's helping make them better, helping them succeed? Who are some 50s you can dial in? And students, if you're in here, how are you being a 50 someone and being wise who you are hanging out with that's making you better and becoming all that God would have you be? And I close with this. Listen, if you do these things, it's no guarantee, right? Just let's be clear. No guarantee. If you do these things, your kid will never make a mistake at all, right? That's not what this is. It's not, but it is really great wisdom, right? These aren't promises. They are really great principles. It for sure doesn't mean that your kid is never going to drift, okay? Because my experience, right, personally, for me and with those that I've talked to, is that most of us drift at one time or another to some extent, and your kids may too. But here's the point. You drive through these different ways. You drive a relational stake so deep, right? So deep into their heart and their soul that if and when they drift, it becomes an anchor that holds them, right? They may go a ways, but it becomes an anchor that holds them and prayerfully, hopefully, eventually draws them back to a God and to the parent and to the spiritual mentors and others that they know love them and are for them. And that's our heart for you, right? I think this is such a big issue, and I've prayed for you. I'm gonna pray for us now, and we're gonna wrap this up. Heavenly Father, this is my prayer as a parent for the parents, that we fight for the legacy of our kids. For those that are doing incredibly well and in a really great fun season, I pray they would take these different dial options and they would just keep working on them and building momentum and going from there. And for those that feel all of the dials are broken and strained, God, I pray for just opportunity, for patience, for wisdom, for courage to hang in there and to keep investing. And that we just trust that there are some stakes that would take hold and become an anchor that may just break through at some point, and that we would keep fighting for that. And for our students, for our kids, God, I pray their hearts would be soft, man, that they're like Jesus grows in favor and stature and wisdom with the Lord. This is our prayer for our kids. If they're 0 to 1, if they're 18 to 30, wherever, that they would grow in favor with you, God, in physically strong and in wisdom and trusting you. And God, we pray all these things in your Son's precious and holy name.